Dear friends, can you hear me? So we hear, friends, in our gospel this evening, the great John the Baptist, our voice of Advent in many ways, crying out in the wilderness, preparing the way.
Can't hear John. I'm sorry. We need a little help. Try it.
How is that?
Perfect.
All righty. So we we hear in our gospel, our primary voice, John the Baptist, a message that is cosmic and powerful, and is certainly a message of hope. But the voice of John, of course, is not the only voice we hear during Advent. And this evening, we've heard two other amazing voices that I'd like to spend just a little time with this evening. As you know, our Christian faith is rooted in the faith of Israel. We share with Israel the conviction that when we wrap ourselves in God's promises, as we heard from Baruch this evening, when we clothe ourselves with God's power, we will have the strength and the courage to face whatever trial or burden comes to us. Whether that burden is exile or rejection, or a new variant named Omicron, we know that when we dress ourselves in God's glory, and I hope that this community, actually, I don't have a lot of hope. I know that this is a community that loves to dress, that we can face the future. And that we will face the future, not only together, but that we will face the future with strength because of our community, because of our love for one another, but most especially because of our faith. The other voice, of course, that I want to spend some time with, especially given our brother John's love for our very first theologian, St. Paul, is this incredible second reading. You know, if John the Baptist speaks as a prophet, Paul speaks to us as a pastor. If John challenges his hearers to prepare the coming of the Lord, Paul encourages his hearers to trust that God is and will be faithful. And of course, the particular line that most struck me, and I'm sure most of you this evening, is this: that God, who has begun this good work in you, in us, among us, will in fact bring it to completion. Paul is saying that when God begins something, God finishes it. God does not love us and bends to forget us or abandon us. God does not bless us and then decide to change direction. Both God's plan and God's intention for us are faithful, are constant. Just like this community, actually. And I think this is a message that I certainly need to hear. in a time when so many things really need to be delivered, handed over, let go of, and given back to God. I certainly don't know our future. None of us do. Not even Dr. Fauci does. Powerful for us this evening. And, you know, there's lots of things to worry about in our lives. And I'd like to give us a little time, just because I love process. And I think actually, you know, one of the things that lessens our trauma is when it is relativized, when we know that we're not alone. That's true of our grief, it's true of our trauma. So I'd love to hear a little bit about what we're worrying about, but I want to bring out one worry that I think is particular to this community. And that's the worry of growing old. And, you know, I'm with everyone here. Not completely everyone, but most of us. You know, I think we worry about losing our energy. I do. Losing our memory, facing inevitable battles with sickness, and watching our senses just deteriorate as they do with time and age. We dread what we know each and every one of us are going to be facing, and that is our struggle with death. A struggle that, in fact, none of us wins. Thank goodness we don't have to win it. We can't control the future because none of us particularly knows the twists and turns by which this aging process will unfold. And yet, we still worry. Gradually, we even can lose some enthusiasm for life and maybe even a little bit of hope for the future. But as our brother Paul says, what are you thinking? Where do you think your life came from? The blessings you have in this life, your family, your friends, your achievements, all the opportunities you never even could have dreamed would be yours. Where do you think all these came from? I think we know that they didn't come from ourselves fully. They didn't come from our own cleverness, our own industry. Could all these blessings that so surround us be only the product of our own will and effectiveness? We know that that's not true. All of these things come from a God who loves us so much that God actually hides things from us, that God keeps things scuro, that God keeps things darkened, that God keeps things at times so that we can't see the fullness of God's glory. That's what's so beautiful about what we do this evening, gathering in candlelight and soft light. The God of Easter joy, the God of that bright morning that we know so well from our Easter liturgies, when we opened that door and the barn was flooded with light, that's not the God of our everyday lives. The God of our everyday lives is a God of a mixture of darkness and light, of gray. And as our brother John would say, life is really about dancing in the gray, not under those strobe lights that some of us remember from our youth, not from maybe the lights that we wish were spotted upon us, but the light that actually God decides to give us when we need it, how we need it, as long as we need it. So, friends, the message I'm going to take away this week is, what has God begun in me and around me, actually just in the past 2 weeks? Not a long time. I can't imagine that far back or forward for that matter. What is God doing right now in my life that I can pray for the trust and the faith and the vision that in fact God will bring it to completion, as God always does. So, I'd love to hear your thoughts, and maybe in addition, of course, to what we're worrying about, because we are always going to hear those, but it may be even more exciting to hear, if you can think of it that quickly, like, what's God begun in you right now, just in this time of Advent, so that all of us can share in your joy and deepen our own joy.